to be clear, I couldn't force you to tell me information, right? So this has certainly been the case where I say, can you tell me some more about them? Like, what's the name of the person that you're talking about? And I've had people say, no, I can't. Sorry, I'm not willing to do that. And in that case, I would encourage you. I would try to, move that forward because, at the bottom line, you are being harmed and that's not acceptable and it's not safe. But it's something that I can't force you to do.
Hey, everybody. Before we start the show, I want to make a couple disclaimers. This show does cover a wide variety of topics related to mental health and life in general, and some of those could be sensitive for you. I want to simultaneously encourage you to be brave in consuming difficult content, but also respect and recognize your limitations. So please use your best judgment. I will never be offended if you need to skip a question or an episode entirely, but feel free to feel it out, check out the episode, and just see what happens. If you need to skip, that's okay, but, feel free to give it a shot first. I also need to say that while I am a psychologist, I'm not your psychologist, and I'm not your therapist. This is not intended to be direct medical advice, and you should not use this as a substitute for professional help. So with those said, let's go ahead and get into the show.
All right. Hello, friends of all varieties. This is the Hardcore Self-Help Podcast, episode 341. I'm your host, Dr. Robert Duff, aka Duff the Psych. I make mental health content for real people just like you. And today we have a question and answer episode. Two pretty short questions, so I think this episode might be on the shorter side, but really good info here, important stuff. Nothing too intense in regards to potentially triggering topics. Some discussion of abuse, but very, very vaguely, nothing in detail. If you'd like to send a question for the show, I've been getting a lot of really good ones lately. Please shoot me an email to duffthepsych@gmail.com or go to duffthepsych.com and use the contact form there. Lots of great stuff on the website, as always. So if you use the search bar or just kind of browse around, lots of good content for you there. Before I get into the episode, I wanted to talk about a couple things that are working well for me right now. One of which is a little strategy that I recently put on my Instagram at Duff the Psych. I put a little reel out, just a very short thing talking about just a strategy that I've been using lately. This is something that I've in the past done a lot more in journaling format, writing it down actually. But lately I've been doing it verbally, just literally talking out loud to myself, sometimes more quietly than others, depending on whether I'm in the car by myself or if I'm walking around with other people in the environment, but just sort of speaking out loud. And what I've been doing is naming 3 things that I'm grateful for. So, gratitude practice, a lot of people suggest this, keeping track of things that you're grateful for, doing it every day or as frequently as possible. I think it's really helpful as well. And so I've been doing that. So 3 things that I'm grateful for, 3 things that I'm proud of myself for, which is one that I don't hear people doing as much. It's, very helpful because I think that very frequently we fall into a negative bias in terms of how we view ourselves, and it takes active effort to sort of reconfigure that attention bias and notice the stuff that you're doing well. So it could be little things, it could be big things. It could be like, I only snoozed once this morning instead of sleeping in for an entire hour. Or it could be something big, like I really helped somebody out recently in, say, therapy, or made a big impact in their life. Same with the gratitude. It could be something very small, like I'm grateful that I live in such a beautiful place. Or something big, like I'm grateful that my partner is communicative and, working through hard things with me, whatever, right? So it could be big or small, and I encourage you to, invite either one. So 3 things that I'm grateful for, 3 things that I'm proud of myself for, and then 1 thing that I want to continue improving on. So this is sort of like constructive, right? So not something that I'm doing bad. I don't want to use that framing, but something that I want to continue improving on. Again, could be big or it could be small. But just doing that every day is an interesting sort of practice. I like doing it on a walk or during a drive when I have plenty of time to just sort of think about it and let it come out. It can be pretty hard at times to think of something, and that's sort of the point. You want to intentionally push yourself to look for those bright spots, to look for those things that you're feeling grateful for, that you are, proud of. And it's, as I said, intentionally shifting your attention. That's hard to say. Intentionally shifting your attention to see those things more, because your brain is automatically going to filter out and see the negative stuff. So this is sort of just balancing the scales. Another thing that's been working really well for me, and this is just an odd thing that I've been doing lately, is getting really, really, really detailed with my calendar. So I use Google Calendar, Gmail, and in particular, okay, obviously I have my appointments on there. I have, upcoming events for, the family, things like that. But as well, in the mornings, so I've been basically starting off the day, doing whatever I need to do, take the kids to school, things of that sort. And then I sit down and I look at my day, and then I actually plug a bunch of stuff into the calendar just for that day. So I'm gonna actually pull one up kind of as a more real example. So looking at my day on Tuesday. So I put down, 8 to 8:30, working on a specific report that I'm working on for a client. 8:30 to 9, book writing. 9 to 10, walk the dog and exercise. 10 o'clock, finish getting ready. 10:30, life maintenance, which is like paying bills and, making calls that I need to make. 11 to 12, lunch and clean. And then I have some appointments, and then, there was some time in the middle of the day to take a break and go out with my wife for a little bit. So I put that in there as well. And doing it on a day-to-day basis has been really helpful for me because it's been a good way to sort of eliminate some of that decision fatigue, and I don't really have to figure out what I should be doing at a given time. I just sort of follow along. And of course, these things get off track every so often, or something gets flipped to another slot, but it's a good outline. And rather than having it set for the whole week, which can be very overwhelming, it's good to sort of sit down for me and take those few minutes, look at the day, consider it, and then plan out an approach that feels good and balanced to me. So if you've never tried anything like that, maybe it's something that you could give a shot as well. But it's just been what's working for me lately. And as always, I don't necessarily, stick to one thing forever. This is working for me right now. It may not work later, and I try to do what is working. So give it a shot. See what you think. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into the questions here. Here's the first one. It reads, "Hey there, I'm a teenager who's considering going to therapy. I know I desperately need it, but I'm scared that if I tell my therapist that my parents used to abuse me, and sometimes they still do, I'm going to be taken away. Would my therapist call the police if they found out that I'm living with a potential abuser?" So thank you for the question. Really good. First off, I'm super proud of you as a teenager for considering going to therapy. I think that so many people avoid getting treatment because they're afraid of what might happen, or maybe they think they don't need it, that it would be a failure for them to, give up and get therapy or something like that. So really proud of you for even thinking about it at this stage. When you're young like you are, it's a really good opportunity, I think, to stop issues that might already be there from getting worse and worse and worse to the point that they're unmanageable, right? So it's really amazing that you're thinking about that. And, this is something that you are trying to take ownership of, which I'm proud of you for. It's not somebody forcing you to go. It's not somebody telling you that this is something that, you really, really need to consider. This is you asking me about this because you want to do it for yourself. So, giving you a little clap there. I'm also really sorry to hear about this. I'm really, really sorry to hear that you have been abused by your parents. That's terrible. It's unacceptable, and you don't deserve it. Regardless of what sort of conflicts you might have with them, or regardless of your particular behavior or anything, it's not your fault. And I hope that you are able to keep yourself safe because you are important. You're an important human being, and you deserve to be able to live safely. And I appreciate you trusting me with this question. I can tell it's something that you're really worried about. So let's get straight into answering the question you actually asked. Yes is the answer. I don't know if you would be taken away per se, but definitely something would happen. If you reveal that your parents have abused you in the past and continue to abuse you at times, your therapist would be required to gather more information about that in order to make a report. And this is for people who are licensed therapists. If somebody is sort of a, just life coach or mentor of some kind, they may not necessarily have these same responsibilities, but people who are in a healthcare position are what are called mandated reporters, meaning they don't have a choice. It's the law that they have to do this. So depending on what state you live in or where you live, if you're not in the States, but it kind of sounds like you are, it may look a little bit different. Typically, police aren't the first call that somebody would make. Instead, it's more likely that the therapist would contact like Child Protective Services, CPS, Adult and Family Services, whatever county organization in your area handles these sorts of cases. That's who they would need to call and potentially make a report to. There are exceptions here. So, for instance, if there was like an imminent threat of violence toward you, meaning like your parents are like, when you get home, I'm going to, lay into you so hard that you're not going to be conscious or something like that. In those cases, it is possible that the police would have to be called. So I don't know exactly what this looks like for you. In some cases that may happen. And of course, in some cases, you start off with the government agency like Child Protective Services, and then they rope in and involve the police if necessary. So there's a lot of different ways that it could look. But yes, absolutely. With certainty, if you were to say, hey, my parents, used to abuse me a lot and they still do sometimes, and you are a minor under 18, then yeah, your therapist would need to do something about that. It's the law. What I would like to do is sort of describe how this has actually looked in my own career, to paint you a bit of a picture. So I've had a lot of circumstances where I have had to make reports to Child Protective Services and Adult Protective Services for that matter, meaning for people who are elders or dependent adults, not children. So yeah, I've had a lot of experience with this and it's gone a lot of different ways. So I want to talk about sort of what it generally looks like. But before that, we're going to take a quick break and talk about today's sponsor. This episode of the show is brought to you by BetterHelp. Getting to know yourself can be a lifelong process. We're always growing. We're always changing. Over the past few years, I've talked about my tendency to pick a word for the year and let that sort of shape my own exploration. This year, that word is identity. And so I am focusing a lot on who I am, how I came to be the way that I am, and trying to discover elements of myself that maybe I haven't given myself the chance to explore. For instance, learning more about my tendency to be somewhat prideful, something I haven't really thought about a lot in my life. Other aspects of my identity that, without the proper attention, go a little bit uncovered. And therapy is a great tool to help with that as well. It's all about deepening your self-awareness and understanding. And sometimes you need a little bit of an external mirror to bounce back the things that you're exploring and thinking about. Sometimes we don't want to see certain things about ourselves. So having that external feedback can be very, very helpful. So I'm happy to have BetterHelp on the show. They can connect you with a licensed therapist who can help you on that journey of self-discovery wherever you might be. So if you're thinking about giving therapy a shot, try BetterHelp out. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, completely suited to your schedule. All you do is fill out a brief questionnaire and you can get matched with a licensed therapist. And if you find that it's not a good match, you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. A great platform for self-exploration or for learning coping skills and dealing with what you need to deal with in your own life. So discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/duff today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/duff for 10% off your first month. Okay, so let's get back into the question here. As I said, I want to talk about some of, my experience with this and what it typically looks like. So if you came into my office and, in the course of our working together, that's actually one thing I want to clarify. So mandated reporters, like a therapist, like a psychologist, like a doctor, we are mandated reporters in the context of our work, right? So if I'm, at my own doctor's office and I hear somebody in the, lobby talking about how their parents abuse them, I do not have a duty to report that because it's not in the context of my own work. But if I am working, say that I am testing somebody's parent for dementia, and in the course of doing that, they reveal that they beat their own daughter or something like that, then that is within the course of my work and I would have to report that. So it has to be within a professional context. It's not like we walk around in the world and at every single moment we're a mandated reporter. It's within the course of our, professional work. So if we were working together, you revealed that you had been abused, I would then need to sort of ask you some questions. I would try to ask you to describe what you're talking about. So what's the nature of the abuse? Are we talking about physical? Are we talking about emotional, psychological, sexual, whatever it might be? And I would encourage you to try to give me whatever details you can, not necessarily pushing you to dive into extremely vivid, traumatic paintings of what's happened, but so I can understand the context of what we're talking about here. Then I would ask you about if this abuser is still around. Are they alive still? Are they still harming you? Are they still harming others? Do they currently have any access to minors, other children? And then I would attempt to gather some information about them. I would ask if you would be willing to share their name, any information you know about them, phone numbers, address, date of birth, things of that sort. Basically as much information as possible. And from there, I would inform you, okay, as a mandated reporter, because you are under the age of 18 and you've been harmed by this adult, I do need to make a report to Child Protective Services. That's part of my role. To be clear, I couldn't force you to tell me information, right? So this has certainly been the case where I say, can you tell me some more about them? Like, what's the name of the person that you're talking about? And I've had people say, no, I can't. Sorry, I'm not willing to do that. And in that case, I would encourage you. I would try to, move that forward because, at the bottom line, you are being harmed and that's not acceptable and it's not safe. But it's something that I can't force you to do, right? And in some cases, I might also offer to make a report together because that can be empowering and very healing for some people, right? So I might say what I said before that, I'm going to make a report to CPS because I'm a mandated reporter. Would you like to be a part of that? Do you want to do this together? And, we can, call together and things of that sort. But before making a full report, meaning actually filling out the form, sending it in and doing all of that, I would need to likely call the agency. So like Child Protective Services to consult. I've done many of these calls. Basically, I call them the main line and say, hey, I'm a psychologist and I'm working with a minor who let me know that abuse has occurred. I would like to consult to see if this is something that can be reported. And so from there, they would have a social worker that works for their agency who would ask me about the information that I gathered, the stuff that we had just talked about. And I would provide them all the information that I have, and they would let me know. And in some cases, like for past abuse, sometimes it's not reportable, right? So sometimes I'll be like, yeah, they let me know that their father used to, beat them. He has moved away and he doesn't have any access to children anymore, or maybe he's in a assisted living facility or something like that, where there's really no chance of additional harm. And the social worker would say, okay, thank you for the information. Based on all that, I don't think that this requires a full report. But in other cases, they say, yep, definitely. Go ahead and fill out that form and, give us a call once that's done so we can follow up or something of that sort. So yeah, they would let me know if that full report's necessary. In your case, I assume it would be, especially since you are still around your parents. It sounds like you're still a minor. I'm assuming so. You said you're a teenager. That could, of course, mean that you're 18, which in this case would change it to, you not being a minor. But, even if you are 18 and you were abused prior to that, that could still be something that's reportable. Again, I would have to consult about that. But in all likelihood, your case would be reportable. And this kind of report, as I said, would be unavoidable for a therapist, doctor, any sort of healthcare worker, or otherwise mandated reporter. Now, moving on from the logistics of, how that would work and why a report would happen, I want to talk a little bit about your situation. I understand that it's a scary prospect to have social workers or law enforcement or whatever professionals digging into your family situation because obviously they're your family. It's complicated, right? You are being harmed by them, but I don't know, you might have some feelings of loyalty still or love toward them, and it's very confusing. And for some people, it can feel like there's a risk of further harm, right? Like aggravating the situation and making it worse. But as I said, the bottom line is you're a minor, right? You're being abused by your parents. That's unacceptable and that needs to change. Sometimes it doesn't mean being taken away. Sometimes it doesn't mean having your parents locked up or something like that. Sometimes it just means a social worker coming out and saying, hey, we're aware of this situation. This isn't okay. We're going to be continuing to check up on you. And that's enough to sort of snap them out of it and keep them from engaging in that behavior because there's that accountability. I can't make promises about the way that it would go, but there are a variety of different ways that it could look. And of course, it depends on the nature and the extent of the abuse too. But you don't have a responsibility to protect your parents, even if they're family. They have a responsibility to protect you, which they are failing at by harming you. And it can be inconvenient, it can be scary, but you're being hurt. And I think that it's within your best interest to be honest with your healthcare providers about it so that they can help you. You haven't done anything wrong. And even if you were to go forward and talk about this, you wouldn't be doing anything wrong. This is not your fault. The last thing I'll say about it, just in terms of your own rights, is that you can always talk with your therapist or any other provider, even, Child Protective Services, you could call them. You can talk to anybody about this in the abstract, meaning not providing all the real details. You can ask them about how they would address certain issues. Like if you're talking to a therapist, you can say, let's say that I were to talk about, a child being hit. What would you have to do about that? And they might press you for more information. They might say like, hey, are you talking about yourself? Which, as I've said, I think it is in your best interest to share. But ultimately, you don't have to say anything that you don't want to say. And if you don't tell them that your parents abuse you, they can't just make a guess that it's happening and do something about that. They can't be like, sounds like you might be talking about yourself. Let's go ahead and make a report, right? Again, there are some exceptions to this, and we're talking about therapists. I know that for like teachers, if they see evidence of potential abuse happening, even if you don't mention it, there are some things that they could do about it. But yeah, I think that it is in your best interest to talk with somebody about this and get some help. I think that you deserve it. You didn't do anything wrong to cause this, and it can't continue. So if you need help, lean on an adult that you can trust. Maybe there's another family member, a teacher, or a coach that you can confide in, and they can support you through this process and continue advising you through it, and just make sure that you're not alone as you go through this. So hopefully those thoughts are helpful to you. I know it's a confusing thing, and you are a young person, so this can all seem very overwhelming, but I hope this gives you sort of the nuts and bolts of the information that you're looking for. And I wish you the absolute best. Thank you for writing in. All right, so the second question reads, Hi, Dr. Duff. I'm a licensed professional counselor in Texas, and I recently accepted a position at a new private practice. I will have greater opportunities at my new job, and it does allow me to earn enough to make a living. Although I'm excited, I can't help but feel a sense of guilt. The fee structure will be different at my new practice, and I worry that this will be a burden to my clients. Of course, I'm offering referrals if needed, but it is hard to start over somewhere else. I will also accept insurance, so this does alleviate some of the pressure. I worry that I'm disappointing my clients, and I worry how my transition will affect them. I would love your insight and words of wisdom. Thank you for your time. Okay, so good question. First off, congratulations on your new position. That's awesome. I think that one thing a lot of people don't realize from the outside, if they're not part of the mental health field, is that it can be actually pretty damn hard to make a living as a mental health professional. I mean, I talked about this, before starting this episode proper, but, in my situation, like this week, I have had 2 cancellations for testing. That means I've had 2 days where I am not spending, 3 hours at the office and an additional like 5, 6, 7 hours on all the other stuff, report writing, interpreting of diagnostics, follow-up, all those sorts of things. So that's a huge chunk of change that will not be in my bank account next month, right? So yeah, especially when you are doing some sort of private practice, it can be very hard to make a living. At least it can without working yourself to death. It doesn't always make intuitive sense because therapy on the consumer side can be pretty expensive, especially if you're paying just out of pocket. But in order to make a living, especially if you're just strictly doing therapy, you have to do a lot of therapy. I know a lot of people who are like master's level therapists, like licensed clinical social workers, licensed professional counselors, marriage and family therapists who put themselves through the ringer, just seeing patient after patient after patient after patient in order to make a living. So it's a real thing. And it's kind of a just fucked up side effect of, America and capitalism and the healthcare system and all of that. But yeah, you got to figure out a way to make a living without killing yourself in the process. Because you deserve to have less financial stress. You deserve to feel confident in your ability to have a living. If I'm interpreting your question correctly, excuse me if I'm not, but it sounds like you could potentially continue working with your existing clients in this new practice, but you would need to switch them over and then charge them more than they're paying right now. I think that's what I'm gathering here. And that's understandably a tough thing to do. Even for people that are not switching practices and just simply raising their own rates because, things are expensive and you need to eventually charge more a lot of times, it can still be tough. We became therapists and not accountants for a reason, right? We want to help people, and providing them with more financial stress can be kind of counterproductive to that. Not very helpful to say, hey, I need to take more of your money. So it always sucks to have to deal with both, the mental health side and then also handle the business stuff. But in the end, it's not personal. You need to make a living and you're not charging anything exploitative, I'm assuming. I do occasionally come across providers that are charging a fee that's, maybe kind of unethical, $500 for a 30-minute session or something like that. I have to assume that's not what we're talking about here. It sounds like you probably have maybe a little bit of a bleeding heart, and even bumping up $50 would be really hard for you to do to people. But I'm assuming you're not exploiting people. That's not the vibe that I get. It's really nice that you're concerned about your clients and you want to make sure that this transition isn't too hard on them, both in terms of, the financial transition as well as any care transition that might be happening. And I think that says a lot about you as a mental health provider. I'm pretty sure that your patients also know this. They also know that you're concerned and that you care. And you may be surprised by their reactions or lack thereof. For individuals that you have a good rapport, a good working relationship with, I would just encourage you to be honest with them. Be as honest as possible. Let them know that you've accepted a new position, that it's going to be very helpful for you and allow you to make a better living. And that's going to require your fees to increase. And you can let them know that you would love to continue working with them, but for some people, it maybe isn't realistic. And then from there, have an open conversation about it. Literally, I think that, if you want a little bit of a script, you could say something like, at the beginning of the session, maybe at the end of the session, like before we wrap up, I do need to let you know about some things that are coming up. There are some changes happening. I wanted you to know that I accepted a new position at a private practice, which I'm very happy about. It's a good thing for me, but it is potentially going to be disruptive to our work together. So I'm talking with all my clients about this right now, just in preparation. I would definitely be happy to continue working with you at this new practice. We could transfer over there. But the fees are higher, so your price for sessions would go up. I know this can be an issue for some people, so I just wanted to open up a discussion about that, see what you're thinking. We do take XYZ insurance, but I'm not sure if that's something that you would be able to do. So what are your thoughts about this? And just open it up in that way. You don't have to know exactly how the conversation is going to go before you open up the conversation. But if they react strongly, they could. Some people might react strongly, say they feel like you're abandoning them or that it's not fair, something like that. You use your clinical skills. You can validate their feelings, and recognize that it can be, really hard to feel like your healthcare is maybe, behind a paywall or something like that. And then also be honest with them. This is a good time for that sort of self-disclosure, and be honest about like how, it's hard to make it as a therapist, and it's always a hard call to raise rates because you have to juggle those feelings of taking care of yourself, but also taking care of your clientele. And you feel bad about it in some ways, but it's also necessary in some ways. You could say that these things are never easy, and you just want to be straightforward and respectful with them. You understand that they have strong feelings about it. You do too. But in the end, this is what needs to happen. And I would also say that you should probably allow some time for some kind of transition. Like if they do have to move to another therapist, you can help prepare them for that. Start to review and wrap up your own work together, and maybe help them, hit the ground running a little bit better so that they're not just starting from scratch and feeling like they have to go through everything all over again. But overall, I would also encourage you to use your own skills, your own coping skills, especially any cognitive work that you do, to fight back against your own negative assumptions that you might be making here. I can see a lot of worry going on. And, it is what it is. This is not personal. People will very likely understand. There's a lot of people who would be like, you know what, good for you. I'm glad. Whether or not they can continue with you. And even if they don't understand, you're still not doing anything wrong. All you can do is your best, and you're trying to make the process as smooth as possible, which is admirable. But this is just sort of the fact of the situation. In my own experience, patients of mine have been very understanding and open to any changes, especially after developing that rapport. Like, they care about me too. They want me to be able to make it. So they understand that it's not personal. And I have to imagine many of your own will be similar. But again, congratulations on the position. This is a interesting transitional time for you, but it will be over soon. And then you'll be settling into this new position and moving forward. So I'm going to say don't worry about it too much, but I can't stop you from worrying about it too much. But hopefully the advice here is going to be helpful for you in, reframing it and making sure that you are taking good care of yourself in the process. I think everything's going to be totally fine. If you were to fast forward, 3 months from now, you're going to be all right. So, just get through the interim. It's going to be okay. And you're going to continue doing great work. So thank you for the questions. We are all done with the episode. This has been episode 341 of the Hardcore Self-Help Podcast. If you would like to send me a question for a future episode, send me an email to duffthepsych@gmail.com. And if you want the show notes for this episode, go to duffthepsych.com/episode 341. And yeah, take care of yourselves. I will see you for the next episode. Bye.